Podcast City Network.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 134 of the Nest Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Zach. Zach, do you smell it? Do you smell that smell in the air? Baseball season's back. We were actually watching players on the field yesterday and today, and what a great time to be alive.
Yeah, I loved it. Having baseball on my TV yesterday was very good. Very good for the soul.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though the Cardinals played to a 4-4 tie and the Red Sox have yet to win a game in spring training, it's still great to actually see baseball on the field. I love it. And, you know, I'm excited for this episode. I'm so stoked that we are talking about my division, the American League East. And we have a couple of great guests that are lined up on here tonight. And we're going to be able to get into the nitty-gritty of the American League East. We are entitling this episode AL East Rivals. And you can't talk about the American League East without having the two biggest rivals of all, the Yankees and the Red Sox. So without any further ado, from the Locked On Yankees podcast, we have Stacey. And from Boston Balling, we have Gabby Hurlbut. Guys, what is going on? Welcome to the Nest Podcast.
Thank you for having us. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm stoked to have both of you on here. And just a little side note, you are the first ladies to ever join us on the Nest Podcast. So in the almost 3 years that we've been doing this show, you two are the first ladies to actually grace us with your presence.
I feel honored to be part of that experience, to be honest.
Me too.
Thanks, guys. So, Stacey, we were talking to you before we went live, and you said you've been writing for the Yankees for about 10 years. Give our listeners a little insight as to what you do and how long you've been doing that and what it is that you did that translated into you being on Locked On Yankees.
Well, I started blogging full-time about the Yankees 10 years ago, almost exactly 10 years ago. I started February of 2011, which is, can't believe 2011 is 10 years ago. But anyway, and I wasn't getting paid. I was doing it for myself, but I took it seriously and posted as much as I possibly could. I was almost not quite pretending to be a beat writer, but I made sure that I followed everyone I could on Twitter to get as much information as possible. I'd watch post-game shows and listen to them as if I were a reporter, taking down the quotes and listening to the guys talk. I started writing more general stuff a few years into it. In 2018, I was asked to take over Locked On Yankees. I had done a few podcasts before that, but nothing to the level of this and the amount of this. I do it. Now we're back to 5 days a week, but it's 5 days a week during the season. And it's a lot of work, but I love it. I liked the transition from writer to podcast host because I get to do both as a podcast host because I write my script out. I write all the info so I'm not stumbling over words. And so I like the combination of the writing and the hosting. And I thought it was a pretty smooth transition to go from writer to host. I miss writing and I'm looking to get back into it a little more this season. But right now I'm enjoying doing this.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's great to see the transition phase and all that. One of our commenters on here, Brad Chandler, he's a member of the Internet Baseball Writers Association of America, and he comes on our podcast on a regular basis, and he's actually gotten the podcast bug recently himself, and he's doing his own thing. So that's pretty cool that you made that transition, and he's doing the same thing. Gabby, what about you? I know you've been doing the Boston Balling podcast for a little while now, and I've seen your guest list, and you've got some pretty amazing guests that come through your channel.
Yeah. So I've always been interested in working in sports. I knew that was something I wanted to do for a while. So I went to college at Ithaca College. Great school. They had a great media program. I learned a lot there. I did some good internships, and then started working at ESPN when I graduated from college, on their digital video social media team, doing a lot of stuff for them, like overseeing a lot of social media and digital video stuff, but still knew that I kind of wanted to pursue other things too. So I started Boston Balling back in December, just kind of as a way to have my own platform to just kind of express my opinions on Boston sports and what's going on there. And I brought on a lot of guests that are in the Boston sports realm in some way, shape, or form, to talk about Boston sports as well. So every week we focus on a different team in Boston sports and kind of break down the latest of what's going on there and analyze the team where they stand at the time. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a great outlet to be able to be creative and showcase other skills besides what I was doing at ESPN. So it's definitely been a great experience so far, and I just hope to continue to grow the following and just see where it goes from here.
That's awesome. If you couldn't tell by the setup that we have, we try to emulate an ESPN broadcast on our show here. So working for ESPN is one of my dream jobs, and I'm kind of jealous that you got to do that. Question before we get into it. Do you guys find it difficult being a woman in sports? Like I said, we've never had a woman on our show before. Kind of few and far between, but I've noticed more and more are starting to take that leap into the profession. How do you guys handle being a woman in the sporting world? And, Stacey, especially you've been doing it for over a decade now.
It's not easy. You're going to get a lot of pushback, which I find odd because I'm old. I'll be 47 in August. So I've been through a lot of different career changes. I was in college in the 90s. But even when I was in college in the 90s, all of my guy friends were really supportive of me liking sports. And I find it so strange that in 2021, there are still guys out there who think it's odd that women like sports and that women play sports and women live and die with sports, and want to make careers out of it. I went to SUNY Oswego, State University of New York at Oswego, because Steve Levy and Linda Cohn from ESPN both went to that school and graduated from that school. That was the main reason why I went to that school, and that was 25 years ago. And I just think it's so funny that guys are still in shock that women like sports and want to do this. And I would have hoped by now that it wouldn't still be so bad for some women doing sports. I mean, there's a lot of awful people out there who say awful things, and not even for any real reason. A woman could just put out a tweet saying she has a new podcast and they'll just spew stuff at her. And you really have to have thick skin. You have to have a good support system, which is why I recommend a lot of women in sports to gather with each other and talk about what you're going through. And so you have someone to talk to about what you're going through. Look for mentors that are older than you to steer you through everything. But yeah, it is tough. It really is. Personally, I haven't gone through as much as other people have, and I hope I didn't just jinx myself, but it's disheartening in a way, but I would encourage any woman who wants to do this to do it. Just push through it. And like I said, get a support system, get someone you can talk to, and just try and brush off the stuff that people say to you. It's hard. And, you have to really let certain things roll off your back. That's all I can say about that.
Gabby, have you had to experience any kind of hardships or anything?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, she hit the nail on the head with a lot of it. I think that a lot of people, when they initially see a female that is involved in sports, they'll kind of write them off immediately, thinking that, we don't know what we're talking about because we're females and we're not supposed to know about sports. And I think that people are really closed off immediately when they find that we're women and we actually know how to talk about sports and we're knowledgeable. And I think that I found a lot of people that make prejudgments about our level of what we do know just because of the sole fact that we're women. And I found a lot of people on social media, especially, that will just attack you for really no reason, or just for even just pointing something out about a team or an athlete, or just having an opinion on something. And people will just make comments like, I've gotten like, you don't deserve to have a real opinion because you're female, or crazy things like that. And I think when it comes down to it, it's just about kind of just having thick skin, like you said, and just trusting that you have the ability and that you earn the spot that you're in because you deserve to be there. And there are plenty of other people, guys too, that would love to be in your place, and they're not there because they're not you. You know what I mean? And you are the one that had the skills and the knowledge and the experience to get to where you are, and not everybody has that. And I think it's just sad that we're still at the point now where people still look at sports as such a gender dominated thing in favor of males. And I hope that someday soon that can change, but we all still experience that on a day-to-day basis, unfortunately. And you just have to block that stuff out and just keep doing your thing, and just, trust that you know what you're talking about. And there are plenty of people out there on the opposite side that will support your work and be like, yeah, you're great. You have good analysis on a lot of things. And that makes us feel validated too. So it's definitely still a problem to this day, and it's unfortunate that it is, but I think it's promising that there's a lot of doors being opened up now more for females in sports.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a great time in that regard, but you're right. I do see it on my end as well, where guys just get on, girls' Twitters and stuff like that, and they just say some really dumb stuff. We are glad that you're here because we do value your opinions and your input and your analysis on sports. And without further ado, let's get into it, because it's spring training time and it's time to talk about baseball, because that's one of the things that unites all of us, male, female, it doesn't matter. We love our baseball and we love our respective teams. Of course, our teams happen to fall in the American League East. The American League East predominantly is one of the best divisions in all of baseball, and I'm saying that unbiased. I'm sure Zach would agree with me, because you've got 27 world champions with the New York Yankees, 9 world championships with the Boston Red Sox. Tampa Bay Rays, they've gotten close. The Blue Jays, they've gotten there a few times. The Orioles have gotten there a few times. So this is a division top to bottom that has a lot of prestige and history. We have to start off with the kings of the division, though. Call it what it is, the New York Yankees. And this year, they look like they're going to be the dominant team, the front runners once again. So, Stacey, what do you think about the New York Yankees this season?
I'm going to say what I've said the last 3 seasons. The key for the Yankees is health. And we've seen how that's affected them the last few seasons. I still can't even believe that in 2019, with all the injuries that they had and with the amount of time spent on the IL and the number of guys on the IL, they still won 103 games. Obviously, health is a big deal, considering Corey Kluber, Jamison Tyone. I mean, they signed these guys hoping, like high risk, high reward kind of guys. And, a lot's riding on them. And I mean, I kind of like the moves, but I also was a little upset that they let Tanaka go. I wasn't upset about them letting J-Hap go. And I don't know. I feel like James Paxton will do better back in Seattle. And I loved what he did for the Yankees. I mean, he did pitch a really big game for them. But his history, his injury history also was just, I don't know. I'm worried about the health. Because that's the big key. If they don't stay healthy, I don't know what's going to happen. You got guys like Judge and Stanton who are always hurt. Supposedly they're doing more yoga now. Hopefully that will work. But
can you imagine Aaron Judge's 6'7" frame trying to do downward dog?
No.
Come on now.
It's funny as hell, but-
No. And Giancarlo Stanton, they're both
Massive
huge
human
guys.
beings.
Yeah. Like if they're doing like what is that? The sun pose where they're like touching the ceiling at that point.
You've got to be outside.
Yeah. Yes. But yeah, health is a big deal. I mean, I like the makeup of the team and they do have some depth there, but I'm just worried about the rotation and everyone's arms staying healthy. That's my big.
And I mean, that's a legitimate concern. Are you going to see Klubot that we saw for years in Cleveland, or are you going to see the broken version of Corey Kluber that we saw after that ricochet off of his forearm?
Right.
He has not been the same guy since that surgery. And you mentioned Jamison Tyone, he's a dude that's coming off of 2 Tommy John surgeries.
Mm.
Is he going to be durable in the long run?
Well, it was funny today. I was recording my show while the game was on, and I was trying to keep track as I was recording. And I went to do my live read while Tyone was in the game. And then I looked at Twitter and it said that he had a 7-pitch 1-2-3 inning. So his inning was over before my live read was even over. And that was like 30 seconds. So it was pretty funny. So I didn't really get to see footage of him, but I'm hoping things work out for him. I like that he was teammates with Cole on the Pirates, so they know each other. Cole loves talking to guys about pitching and helping them with their pitching. And I think Garrett Cole, aside from being a good pitcher, he's a good influence on his fellow pitchers. And I think that that'll help Tyone a lot if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Do you think Garrett Cole can be the ace? And it sounds like you do, if he's going to be a quality pitcher and mentoring the younger guys on that staff. But I wonder how much of that quality pitcher was because of the Astros and what they were doing.
I don't think that.
You don't think that has anything to do with it? Okay.
No, because he was warming up. He was getting into a groove as the season went on. Because I feel like with the 60-game season, it's hard to judge a pitcher on that amount of starts because they were so few. Like they didn't make a lot of starts. Some of these guys, it takes them 10 to 12 starts to kind of get into a groove in a regular 162 game season. Garrett Cole's fine. Yankee fans always overreact to everything. He picked it up down the stretch. I'm not worried about Garrett Cole at all.
To your point, Cole made 12 starts in 2020 and he went 7-3 with a 2.84 ERA. So you're right. That's not necessarily a terrible stat line, but in 2020, he's going to be expected to push 200 plus innings, 30 plus starts. So that's going to be a little bit longer of a grind. We'll see if he's able to hold up during all that, especially if the rest of the rotation starts to get a little bit shaky and he's depended on to go 6-7 innings to save that bullpen every night.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Stanton and Judge, and Zach and I have talked about this quite a bit, how those guys are pretty much made of glass. It seems like since Stanton came to New York, he hasn't really played a whole season. I think he played 150 games his first year there, but after that, it's been nothing pretty much. I think he played 41 games since 2019, which that's not what you're paying him to do.
Right.
And then, Judge, he also has been injury prone since his rookie season, whenever he went off and became a superstar. Last season, neither one of them played half of the 60 games that were in the season. You're going to need both of those guys for a lot more this coming year. What other moves have the Yankees made this offseason that you're looking forward to seeing on the field?
Trying to think of the other moves they've made.
Yeah, it hasn't.
Bruce made a nice play today. I forgot he was even on the Yankees.
Who's that?
Opt out at some point later in the month. I was glad they brought DJ LeMahieu back. I was a little worried about that, but they weren't really. He wasn't talking to anyone else, and I didn't think he was going to sign with anyone else. I was happy they brought Brett Gardner back because I feel it would have been unfair if Brett Gardner's last season as a Yankee or even a baseball player wouldn't be in front of any kind of fans. I'm hoping that by the time the season gets more into the summer months, that more people are vaccinated, more people can go to games, and it's safer to be around and more normalcy happens. Because, he's the last holdover from the 2009 season. He's the veteran on the team. He mentors the young kids. Clint Frazier spoke glowingly about him. He said, even though we're in a competition, he's like a big brother to me. Then he even joked that Gardner's more immature than him, which I could see because Gardner's a big prankster. So I'm happy they brought him back. I just don't want to see him starting ever. Because if Brett Gardner's starting and if Giancarlo Stanton is playing in the field, something bad has happened to the Yankees outfield. They were talking about maybe wanting Stanton to play more in the field, and other people are like, oh, well, you can't go by his past injuries. And I said, yes, I can, because it's always his legs and it's always him running, and I don't want him anywhere near an outfield wall. No, thank you. Those two moves, just bringing those guys back. Like I said earlier, I was upset about them letting Tanaka go. Tanaka was a good Yankee. I feel bad that they couldn't win with him on the team. And I think he was the one I was most upset about them losing, but I'm glad they brought LeMahieu back. That was a no-brainer. I mean, he's been their best player for 2 years. And the Gardner, they need a veteran like him on the team. They still have a bunch of young guys on that team, and having him around is a good thing.
LeMahieu does seem like it was a no-brainer, but it took them a long time to come to that decision to bring him back, which was a little bit weird in my opinion. Coming over from Colorado, he lit the American League on fire. He was one of those guys that it's like, yep, here's your extension after year one. But for some reason, they decided to wait and let him test free agency and all that stuff. I was hoping that he was going to end up coming over to Boston because I knew the Boston Red Sox were going to be in need of a second baseman. Whether Dustin Pedroia had retired or not, there was going to be that hole that needed to be filled because Pedroia is not the Pedroia that was the laser show back in 2007, 2008, when he was winning Rookie of the Year and MVP. Gabby, that brings us to talk a little bit more about the Red Sox, who they did, I guess, in a roundabout way, fill that second baseman hole with Kike Hernandez. What do you think about bringing him in to plug in that second base gap, and then also having Marwin Gonzalez that can kind of be like a Swiss Army knife player that can play any position on the field?
Yeah, I really do like the Kike Hernandez signing. I think that is something that people had mixed feelings on, but I think the general consensus now is that we needed somebody like Kike that could really be a good locker room guy. And I know he was very well liked among Dodgers fans as somebody that could boost the morale in the locker room and be somebody that really represented a true leader for a team and could just bring that team together off the field. And so I think in terms of just the off-field perspective, I think he's really good, but also just like you mentioned, how versatile he is and how he can really fill in anywhere because he's played pretty much every position. I think that he's actually going to be a really, really good fit for this team. And I think with Alex Cora being back as the manager, I could see him being somebody that works really well with Alex, and I think he's going to really end up stepping up and having a good year with the Red Sox. And they did need to fill that hole. And I think that Kike was one of the best they could have done in terms of just how much he has to offer and he can bring to this team right now. And I do think that signing as of now might end up being a little underrated. But I think that he's in a position to really excel in Boston this year. And I think it's kind of set up for it to be that way.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I love the Kike Hernandez move. I think that instantly gave you an everyday player and a guy who hasn't really been able to see that at the major league level because the Dodgers were so stacked everywhere. One of the big moves of the offseason for the Red Sox obviously was trading Andrew Benintendi. And this is one that kind of hit a lot of Red Sox players in their soft spot because we all love Benny. We all love what he did in 2018. That catch in the ALCS that sent them to the World Series is the stuff of legends. Yeah. But Chaim Bloom was able to flip him for 5 players. Andrew Benintendi was coming off of back-to-back down seasons, and he was still able to get 5 players for him. In my opinion, that is a great move because you get a guy who's big league level in the outfield in Franchi Cordero. You also get a relief pitcher in Josh Winkowski, however you say his last name, Ski Slopes, let's call him that. And then 3 players to be named later. So you get a lot of good talent coming back, and then you're going to have a chance to rebuild that farm, which is something that the Red Sox are definitely doing. Rebuild mode. So, in your opinion on Chaim Bloom, are you on the fire Chaim Bloom train, or are you in Chaim we trust?
No, absolutely not. And I think this was a hard one to kind of think about at first, because Chaim comes in and the first big move he makes is trade Mookie Betts, right?
Yeah.
So obviously that's going to put people on edge, because Mookie Betts is a once-in-a-lifetime talent that you're probably not going to find again. And so he comes in and he does that, and we're all like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen now? Like, if you're going to trade Mookie Betts, who's like the best player in his generation probably, then what other moves is he going to make? And it's sad to think about and look at what the outfield was when they won the World Series in 2018, because you had 2 Gold Glovers in that outfield, and then you had Andrew Benintendi also, who almost won a Gold Glove himself. And you look at that outfield, and the fact that all 3 of them are gone now is sad, because that was an all-star outfield, and it was real. It was so fun to watch them every day, and I really thought when they traded Andrew Benintendi, I was like, oh, there's a chance now that maybe they'll bring JBJ back. Then he signed Marwin Gonzalez, and I was like, okay, so it seems like now they might be pretty set in terms of what they're thinking for the outfield. But I am not on the fire Bloom train right now, and I say this because he's looking at this from a perspective like, we have the capability and the talent to possibly compete in 2021, but we also might not. And if we don't, we have a lot of good prospects to set us up for the future now. And even like you said with the Benintendi trade, the fact that he got 5 players out of that who and they basically have their pick when it comes to who they get and the players to be named later. They can basically scout the prospects and decide who they want. This is going to be a very, very good team in a few years. I mean, we're even watching today, we're watching some of these players, and yesterday too, like Peter Downs had a great game yesterday offensively. And so it's nice to see some of these young guys step up. And I really think Alex Verdugo is going to be great too. I think he's going to have a really good year this year. And I think they're lined up to have a really good future after 2021. And I think the thing about this year is that they made some changes where they're going to be better than I think people are anticipating them to be. And they'll still hit. I mean, their offense was great, and they put up some league-leading offensive numbers last year. So people kind of forget that just because of how bad the pitching was. Which obviously was a huge issue. But they have improved the pitching, and they also didn't have Erod or Chris Sale. And I think having Erod back and then eventually Sale back, I think that will make a difference. And obviously with Sale, it's questionable because of the Tommy John, and we don't know if he's going to come back to being full form. We can only hope that he will. But having them back, I think, will make a difference. And they made some changes to the bullpen too, to upgrade. And so I really do think that this team is not going to be a sleeper team like they were last year that people think. And I think that with Bloom, some people right now think that the moves that he's made are not doing anything for this team. But if you look into the future, like a few years from now, I think they're pretty set up to be really, really good going forward. Even if they're not in contention this year, which I think if everything comes together, they could be a wild card team. But even if they're not, I think that they have some really good young talent that sets them up to be good going forward the next few years. So I'm more on the let's keep Bloom around and see what he can do. And I mean, yeah, he has no championships, and obviously that kind of concerns people a little, myself included. But I think so far what he's done in the grand scheme of things seems to make sense, because they did need to do a lot of work on the farm system, and that was in a really bad place. And it seems like he's already making changes to make them contenders in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming off of Dave Dombrowski's tenure where he was willing to deal the farm for a championship contender now, he had to go back and rebuild it. And Stacey can tell us a thing or two about watching this kind of a rebuild happen, because it's the same exact thing the Yankees did about 5 or 6 years ago. And then they were able to bring up guys like Andujar, Torres.
That wasn't a rebuild. Compared to the early 90s, that was not a rebuild. I lived through the early 90s, but I know what you mean.
I mean, it was in a sense, though, because you had all those stars that were aging, like your Jeters, your Mariano Rivera's, those type of guys that were from the mid-90s that were retiring or moving on to other things or whatever. And then you had all these unproven guys that were in there. Like I remember when Didi Gregorius was coming up and everyone was like, oh, this is the guy that's replacing Jeter, please. And then he turned into a superstar in his own right. Maybe the short porch helped him a little bit. Maybe it didn't. I don't know, but it is what it is. She can tell us a thing or two about how this all will work and how building that farm system up to get those guys at the big league level down the road is huge. And I think you're right, Gabby. I think bringing in guys like Alex Verdugo and Jeter Downs, both of which were in that Mookie Betts trade that you talked about. And then, you've got the young guys like Jarren Duran, Bobby Dahlback, Tristan Cassis, all waiting there ready to come up. Like it's going to be good in the next few years. And if they're in contention this year, if they're, say June, July, when Chris Sale is ready to come back and they're only a few games out, I look for them to make a splash at the trade deadline because they've got the capital to do it. Yeah. And if they want to move, they can.
And even with the Ottavino signing, I know that still has mixed feelings now too, because Ottavino, I mean, we've seen what he can do. I mean, I saw him when he played with the Yankees and what he really had. Obviously, he had an off season last year, and obviously last year is hard to gauge just because it was a shortened season, but just the last couple of years, especially, just he hasn't had his best stuff overall, I would say. But even with him, though, that signing leaves a lot of flexibility, too, because when it's approaching the deadline, if they're not in contention this year, they can flip Ottavino for more pitching prospects at that point to set them up down the road, too. So I do think that that's also an underrated signing if you look at the longer term, because if they're contenders, they obviously won't trade him. But if they're not, they can flip him to get more pitching prospects later on. And I think that that's something that people aren't recognizing right now either. So I do think that this Red Sox team, as it stands now, is going to be better than people are expecting. And I think that as long as everybody stays healthy, which, I mean, Stacey preached health with the Yankees, as long as the pitching staff can stay healthy, I do think that they're going to be better than they're kind of anticipated to be right now.
Yep, I agree. Health is essential for both of the squads. Moving on into the American League East, now we've got the Tampa Bay Rays, the defending American League champions. I actually had another guest that was lined up to come on this show that was from a Rays podcast, but he, much like the Rays, backed out before the season. He backed out before the episode even started. So the only thing that I can say good about the Rays is bringing back Chris Archer, much like the way that the Mariners were able to bring back Paxton.
Right.
They were able to they were able to trade him, get all the prospects and all that, and then get their guy back in return. He's the only piece this offseason that I think has been worth anything for them. They've also had to give up a lot in this offseason. Blake Snell is now pitching for the Padres. That was a huge one, in my opinion, because
going to be really good this year.
This guy was a Cy Young Award winner, 3 years ago, and now he's playing on the West Coast. It's bizarre. But one question that I want to ask about the Rays to both of you is, what can we expect from Randy Arozarena? This guy was a playoff hero. He was a postseason hero for the Rays, and then he had some off-season drama down in Mexico where he got kind of arrested and all that stuff. I mean, he was arrested, but then the charges were dropped because they didn't want to press charges and all that stuff. So he was kind of arrested, but it is what it is. What do you guys think? Is he going to have that bounce back year where he's going to be that guy that he was in the postseason, or is he going to be the guy that the Cardinals ultimately traded?
I have no idea. I really don't. I mean, would I like for him to have a good year? No, because I'm a Yankee fan.
And the Rays kill the Yankees.
Exactly.
All right. Calm down. No, the one thing I will say about the Rays that I think we should all talk about is how glorious Tyler Glasnow's hair is, because I was watching him not so much during the ALCS because I was too nervous to pay attention, but during the World Series, I was watching him, and he has one, the most glorious mane of hair, perhaps in all of baseball, and two, a chiseled Prince-like face that I wish he wasn't on the Rays because I don't like them and I want to like him. Anyway, back to Rosarina. I don't know. I mean, it just felt like, I don't know. It felt like almost like Pedro Serrano during batting practice in Major League, where he was hitting all these balls. Like, whoa. And then they started throwing curveballs and, off-speed pitches, and he was swinging through them. And I'm thinking that maybe now that they've seen what he can do, pitchers will be more prepared for him, and maybe he won't be as good this year, but who knows? We'll see. That's something to watch, really. That is like, I think that's the main thing. Can he keep it up? Because I mean, he just really came out of nowhere last year. It's like, who the hell is this guy? He's annoying.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, no, really though. Like everybody was like, "Who is this kid?" And where they find him? But
I mean, it's the kind of story you like in baseball, because you like when guys you've never really heard of or who weren't really touted come out of nowhere and have performances like that in the playoffs. Like that's the type of stuff you want to see in baseball. So it would be good for baseball for him to still be as good as he was.
just nice for us,
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, the thing about the Rays that always has bothered me is just the fact that, they always find a way. They traded Blake Snell, but to me, just based on the way that the Rays roll, they'll find some other no-name pitcher that'll come in and like outshine everybody and basically take Blake Snell's place, and people are going to be like, who the heck is this? Because that's just how the Rays operate, right? And so that to me was just like, okay, they traded Snell, but obviously that means there's some sort of young pitcher that the Rays see that can fill his spot, and nobody's going to know who it is, and that's just kind of how they roll. But in terms of Rosarina, I mean, I really, really was impressed with what I saw in the postseason last year. I mean, that kid is just something else. I feel like part of me wants to say, yeah, he's gonna come back and have another year like he had in that postseason last year, and he's gonna put up these crazy numbers, and he's gonna be one of those players that everybody doesn't want to face when it's like, the bottom of the ninth and the bases are loaded and you need somebody to come up clutch for the Rays, and he's going to be that person that comes up. And I feel like fans watching games are still going to be nervous that it's him regardless of how he's playing, just because of those clutch moments that he did perform in the postseason last year. So in terms of his season, I feel like it's hard to say whether he's going to be, this Randy Arozarena that we saw in the playoffs, and he probably won't be the whole year, but I do still feel like he's going to be the guy that's going to find a way to be clutch when he needs to be, when the Rays are down by like a run or something in the bottom of the ninth, and they need somebody that's going to come up and have a big hit, and it's going to be him. So I do still feel like he's going to be that guy, but I don't think he's going to be able to have that level of play and maintain that all season like he did in the postseason last year, because that was just something else, and especially because it was a shortened season too, and there weren't as many games. So I wonder about kind of the durability factor and if he can carry that through a regular 162 game length season and still be able to do what he did.
Right.
Yeah, and I wonder if pitching staffs will, now that they've seen what his tendencies are and what he doesn't like to hit, we'll start paying attention more to that. Because like Stacey said, sure, you can hit the fastball, but can he hit a nasty curveball and stuff like that? And because he was a no-name guy, no one really knew what he liked to hit and what he didn't like to hit. Now that they kind of know that kind of thing, what is he going to be? And it is a huge question mark for sure.
Yeah, it is. I'm excited to see him, though. Just like Stacey said, I think it's going to be fun to watch him again this year and just kind of see what he has.
I'm sure Zach, as a Cardinals fan, is kind of having buyer's remorse or whatever because they sold on him. And, now that they have Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt, I bet he wishes they had a little bit more pop in that outfield. So it is what it is. One team that is certainly not lacking in young studs that have pop at the bat is the Toronto Blue Jays. And the Toronto Blue Jays are a sleeper, in my opinion, this year. They are a team that could come out of nowhere and sweep the entire division. They've got the young core that I mentioned with Vladdy Jr., with Biggio, and Bo Bichette. Yep. And then they just added veteran George Springer to the mix. They've got some good pitching with Ryu, Robbie Ray, probably Tanner Rourke going to plug into that fifth hole. They've got some good depth. They've got a good team. What do you guys think about the Toronto Blue Jays this year?
I mean, I'm scared about them, to be honest. They are not a team that I am looking forward to seeing this year. And when you say sleeper team, I think you're right in terms of their potential, that people are kind of underestimating what they can do. Everybody acknowledges, I think, that they are going to be a serious contender in the AL East. Mm-hmm. But I do think that they're being underestimated in terms of everything that they can do. Because I think that they can, if that team gets on a hot streak at the right time, I think that they really can come out of nowhere, win the AL East, and have a deep playoff run too. And I think that as fans of other teams, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but as a fan of another team in Toronto's division, I worry about that, obviously not only this year, but for years to come too, because they really spent a lot of time building up those core young players. And now we're looking at a situation where they have those veterans like George Springer on the team, and they have that young talent that's still like blossoming and growing into good players. And so I think that Toronto is set up to really make a serious run this year. And they might not. I mean, it's hard to know for sure just because a lot of those players are still young. But I think if everything goes right for them, that's going to be a team that a lot of teams will not want to see in crunch time and into the postseason.
Yeah, in a 5 or 7 game series, they're going to be very tough.
Yeah.
Stacey, what do you think about the Blue Jays' chances this year?
I would agree with that. They scare me. I'm also not happy about having to see George Springer 19 times now instead of 6.
Right.
Really?
I once wrote for the Hardball Times about we got to pick what player we'd want to build a team around. And this was 4 or 5 years ago. I picked George Springer. I was like, I like George Springer. He's good. Yeah, this was like 2016. And then, but yeah.
Nothing happened of note, right?
No, nothing. No.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Yeah, that signing George Springer was so upsetting.
But yeah, no, I definitely, like you said, they're a sleeper, but they're not a sleeper. People realize what their potential. I think it's almost funny, like the term sleeper. I don't know. I feel like it doesn't suit them because when I look at the division, I see the Yankees, Rays, and Blue Jays being really close, where they all can. If everything goes well for each team, this could be one of those seasons where you see it come down to the wire between 2 or 3 teams at the same time, which is something people always want, and it never happens, or it peters out at the end. So yeah, I definitely don't sleep on the Blue Jays because they're scary. Their young players are good. Guerrero Jr. lost all that weight. He looks great. They're scary at the plate. They have solid pitching. And yeah, I mean, the AL East this year could be really scary, like scarier than other years have been, potentially.
It's going to be fun to watch the division, to be honest.
Yeah, it really will be. Last week we covered the NL West, and that's going to be a fun one to watch, but it's ultimately a 2-team chase. The AL East could really come down to a 4-team race if all things go right. I'm a little bit less in on the Rays than it sounds like you are, Stacey. I think they're going to fall off.
Never underestimate them.
Never underestimate them. Sure, I got it, but I don't think they've got the magic in them 2 years in a row. And then ultimately, the bottom of the barrel is the poor, lowly Baltimore Orioles. That they're just going to be in last place from the start of the season. where they've been for the past 4 seasons. They haven't made a playoff since 2016. The only bright spot for the Orioles is Trey Mancini's return. I do, tip the cap to that guy. That's something that's definitely worth celebrating, coming back off of his cancer diagnosis and all that stuff. And Felix Hernandez and Matt Harvey both have minor league deals with the Orioles. So maybe one of them will be able to climb back to the majors and be on an opening day roster one more time.
Yeah. I mean, I just always look at it and I watch teams play the Orioles and I'm like, I just feel so badly for people that are Orioles fans, because year after year, this is just how it is. And it's just really unfortunate, because the last few years, it's like, there doesn't seem to be any sort of positive direction that they're moving in either. And it's, at least it's like, with other teams, they'll have a bad year, but then they'll usually do some things in the off season to improve, or you can be excited about it. But with the Orioles, it just seems to be this constant state of like, yeah, we're going to be at the bottom, and they haven't done a whole lot to really grow the team. So it's just unfortunate if you're an Orioles fan to have to watch that every year now and be like, yeah, our team is just going to be in last place again, and there's just nothing we can do about it.
Yeah. I was talking about this with our Locked On Orioles host, talking about how, for those few years in the mid 2010s when they were, they played the Yankees in 2012, they made it in the wild card game in 2016 where Buck didn't take Britton out of the bullpen. Yeah. And that was just such a horrible ending for them, especially after the year that Britton had in 2016, for them to not even, I remember watching live and being like, what are you doing? Why aren't you bringing him into the game? What's the matter?
Yeah.
And for their playoff run to end in that manner, and for them to be as bad as they've been the last few, it's just, it's not good to see. Because you want the other teams in the division to be competitive, right? I mean, in some ways, it is fun to beat up on some teams. I mean, a couple seasons ago, the Yankees lost the first 2 out of 3 to Baltimore and then didn't lose the rest of the season. And that was the year that Gleyber Torres was torturing poor Gary Thorne, and that was kind of fun. But you want to see the other teams not give up. You want to see them do things. And like you were saying, even when some teams are bad, that they have a plan for the future. Mm-hmm. And it feels like the Orioles don't.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's been that way for a while. Now, we could be wrong. They could have something building up, and who knows, maybe in like 3 or 4 years down the line, something might happen. But right now, it doesn't seem like anything's brewing.
Maybe their single A team was lighting the world on fire, and then COVID happened and it all got, flushed down the toilet. Who knows? I don't think that's the case though. Yeah. And Fangraphs kind of agrees with this. They've got the Orioles as a 0% chance of making the playoffs, which I thought last week when we talked about the Rockies having a 0.1% that it was going to be the lowest that we saw. No, lo and behold, the Orioles are rocking an actual 0 on there. And Fangraphs also have the Rays dropping down a considerable amount. So here you see the Yankees up top at 91.6%. So a lot of people out there are expecting that the Yankees to win the division and go on and make the playoffs. So my final question to you ladies, who wins the division?
Do you want to go ahead?
I think we all know the answer to this one.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I really don't know. I really don't. There are some years where I can be sure and say, okay, this team's going to win. They're definitely winning the division. And I don't feel that way, even with the Yankees. I can't. I'm not one of those Yankee fans who's like, oh, the Yankees are the best and they're going to do this. Like, I'm a realistic Yankee fan because I've been watching baseball for so long. And could they win the division? Yes.
Sure.
But am I going to guarantee that they're winning the division? No, I'm not. I can't.
Well, so first of all, with the Fangraphs thing, I do think that 53% for the Blue Jays is actually too low in terms of their chances to make the playoffs. I think that that's totally underestimating that team based on their roster right now. I think that that's too low of a percentage for them. In terms of winning the division, I really do still feel like, taking everything into consideration, though, I feel like the Yankees will win the division. And I say that because they have a lot more of the veteran talent than the Blue Jays have right now. And when it comes to Toronto, they are obviously, like we talked about, not going to be a cakewalk team to beat. And I think that the Yankees might run into some trouble later on in the season when it comes to crunch time. And it could be, like Stacey said, the difference between like 1 or 2 games down the stretch in terms of winning the division. But I think when it comes to the big picture of everything, the Blue Jays right now, they have the young talent, but they're still growing that. And I think that ultimately at the end of the day, if the Yankees stay healthy, that they will win the division, because I think on paper with their roster, they have the best complete and made up roster in the division.
I agree with that. And, Stacey alluded to it earlier, and we've talked about it on and off throughout the entire episode. Health is going to play the biggest role in the 2021 season for the AL East. So, ladies, I thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for giving us so much of your time and your expert analysis that you were able to provide for us. I hope we can have you back sometime later on in the season. Maybe as it gets closer to playoffs, we can revisit some of this conversation and see where our ideas and our predictions play out. It was great to have you both on here. Thank you so much. Gabby, tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter, Instagram, whatever you have. And then Stacey, you can go after her.
Yeah, sure. So I'm on all social media at Gabby Hurlbut 10 on Twitter, at Gabby _Hurlbut 10 on Instagram. And then my Boston Balling podcast has its own social media platforms too, at Boston Balling on Twitter and at Boston _Balling _podcast on Instagram, and a Boston Balling Facebook page. So you can find that there as well as on any podcast streaming platform. I drop a new episode every Tuesday, so I hope people can tune into that too. But yeah, I'm pretty much on everywhere, every social media platform.
I'm on Twitter at StayScots because my last name is too long. Locked On Yankees has a Twitter account. It's Locked On Yankees, all one word. Instagram, same thing, Locked On Yankees, all one word. You can find Locked On Yankees everywhere on every platform available for podcasts. And yeah, that's it. We do it 5 days a week.
The Locked On Network is crazy good. We had Javi and Jeff from Locked On Dodgers and Locked On Padres on last week. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to look for Locked On Yankees to try to fill this spot. And I definitely thank you so much for stepping in on short notice, because I just hit you up earlier today and we put this together. So I appreciate that so much. Gabby, thank you again so much for coming on. We touched base, last week, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and we kept in touch. We made it happen. So I appreciate both of you guys so much for coming on and talking baseball with us.
Thank you for having me.
It was a good time.
See you guys. All right, so that's the American League East. Zach, I know you didn't really get to talk about it too much, but who do you think is going to win the American League East?
I think the ladies hit the nail on the head. It's all comes down to health. If those Yankees, especially Stanton and Judge, if they can stay healthy, that's an absolutely dangerous 100-win team like we've seen before. And if not, then I think the door is completely open for the Blue Jays to take it. I'm with you. I do not have confidence in this Rays team. They've lost the best pitcher they've ever had. And I think they play too far into analytics. We obviously have seen that they took Blake Snell out because their analytics dictate a lot of what they do. And I think that's going to eventually just be their downfall. They may do okay. They may get a wild card spot, maybe, but I do not see them running away with the division or anything like that.
Well, not only Snell, they let Charlie Morton walk as well.
That's true.
So
yeah, that's right.
They lost a lot of pitching. So I definitely think that the FanGraphs analysis of the Rays being in fourth place is pretty accurate. Absolutely. I think they're going to drop quite a bit. But, that was our conversation about the American League East. We appreciate everybody that tuned in for that. But now it's time to clear the bases, Zach. And we've got some news from around other sports leagues that is worth talking about here in the final 10 minutes of the show or whatever. And I want to kick it off by saying the champ is here. That's right. I got the belt, fantasy football champion right here. And I'm so ready to defend this thing this coming fall. I'm so ready to get into another football season because I think this next one's going to be a good one without as much worry of the coronavirus and things like that. This year it was weird for all sports, and I'm thankful that sports are back in full swing. And we've got fans in the stands at spring training. We're going to have fans in the stands at the regular season games. And you got to think that the NFL is going to be packed to the gills whenever they get the opportunity. One thing we do know about the NFL is that we've got some quarterback controversies. Where will Russell Wilson play? Where will Deshaun Watson play? Where will Dak end up? There's questions about him now. There are rumors flying around about all these guys. But one thing we do know is that that J.J. Watt is going to be a member of the Arizona Cardinals. And we called it. We called that from the get-go. We said that. No, actually, we didn't call that because I don't think anybody saw that one coming.
No, not a soul out there saw that coming.
That one blindsided the world. But J.J. Watt himself released the photo of him wearing the Cardinals shirt while he was working out. And he said, "Source me." I mean, it doesn't get much more clear and much more from the source than the man who's going to be playing there himself. I've also seen since that he posted a picture with the owner of the Cardinals and on his private jet. So looks like it's a signed, sealed, and delivered kind of deal. My question is how much does JJ have left in the tank? And is that enough to put the Cardinals over the edge?
I don't think it even moves the needle, to be completely honest. I don't think the Cardinals have any of the pieces that they need. I think obviously D-Hop is probably one of the best, if not the best wide receiver out there. And Kyler Murray is decent, but they need a hell of a lot more than that. I mean, you can't win a championship with a quarterback and a wide receiver. Just ask Aaron Rodgers. It doesn't work. I think an older J.J. Watt, a beat-up J.J. Watt, doesn't really change their chances, in my opinion. I think he's going to make them better, of course, but
when healthy.
Yeah. And that's another big point is he's a huge question mark when it comes to his health. He's had a lot of injuries. Weird move. I kind of expected him to go ring chasing. And I think most of the sports world kind of expected that too. If anything, go to the Packers. They're a huge contender. But no, he decided to go with the Cardinals. I don't know what that decision was based on. I mean, he's going to get paid pretty well. From what I've seen, it's like a $31 million deal with $23 million guaranteed or something, which is good. It's great for a player who's had a lot of injuries, who's kind of older, probably on the last 5 years of his career or so. So I don't know. I guess he wasn't ring chasing like we all thought he was.
Yeah, I guess not. I mean, I was with you. I thought that he would end up in Green Bay. That was my official prediction, but he pulled the wool over all of us and decided to go out west, and maybe he did miss D-Hop.
Yeah, I guess so.
One more quarterback that we know for sure that will be looking for a new home this coming year is comeback player of the year, Alex Smith, because it is reported that he is expected to be released from the Washington football team after they extended Taylor Heineke. So not only did Alex Smith almost die on a football field and somehow manage to come back and lead the Washington football team to a playoff berth, now they've just fired him.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? I mean, do you think he'll end up as a starter somewhere else, or is this pretty much the final curtain for Alex Smith?
I could see him maybe being a backup and maybe playing a few games at a team. But yeah, I think if Heineke wouldn't have had that he threw like a couple touchdowns in one game, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
I think if he wouldn't have had that glimpse of talent, then the Redskins would have probably brought him back. But they were like, oh, hey, Heineke can play football. We don't need to keep this old guy around. So they cut him, which sucks because, like you said, he was comeback player of the year, comeback player of the decade, maybe. And it sucks to see him not have a good ending to his career. I hope he does end up somewhere. I hope we do get to see him play, and I hope it all works out. But I think this may be, the ending of Alex Smith.
Yeah, and like you said, that kind of sucks because it's not the way that I'm sure he wanted to go out at all. And speaking of the end of a career, Tiger Woods was involved in a pretty horrific car accident, and the PGA golfers this past Sunday wore Tiger's signature red on the course, and a lot of guys were giving the tip of the cap to Tiger. What did you think when you heard the news of the accident, and do you think we're ever going to see Tiger on a golf course again?
I thought the worst. I mean, whenever I just saw that headline that he was in a car accident and they had to use the jaws of life and all that stuff to get him out, I was like, oh God, we've lost another just absolute superstar in the sports world.
Yeah.
And luckily, he's still with us. He does have some pretty serious leg injuries, but he's still here. If he does come back to the PGA Tour, it's going to be a long road. He was already kind of struggling. He's had a fused back for a couple of years now, and that can't be good for a golf career. And obviously, he's had a storied career and one of the best to ever do it. This kind of thing sucks. And you see the impact that he's made. Like you said, all the guys wore red on Sunday like he does. It sucks. I hate to see this kind of stuff. And obviously, I hope he has a speedy recovery. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him on a professional course ever again, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think we may eventually see him on like a senior circuit or something like that. But as far as being a PGA competitor, I think this might be it for Tiger, which is, again, an unfortunate end and not the way that I'm sure he wanted to go out.
Yep.
All right, guys, that was the show. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Thanks for everybody that's been commenting along and listening to what we have to say. Thanks again to the two ladies that we had, Gabby and Stacey. They were fantastic. A prime example of women in sports and how amazing it is to have their opinions and their analysis because they know what they're talking about. And they definitely know their teams. And I look forward to having a relationship with them in the future and having them back on the show because it was great having them on and great talking to them. Thanks to everybody. We'll see you again next week when we talk about the NL Central. Zach, I know you're excited about that one. We'll see you then. Peace.